1 minute.
Mic test. 1, 2, 3, mic test. $50. $40. Good evening, I'm Bobby Alampay. The big stories tonight. The European Parliament is threatening to remove the Philippines' tariff exemptions on export products due to the alleged deterioration of human rights in the country. Palace spokesman Harry Roque says, go ahead. The world tally for COVID-19 has just breached the 30 million mark, with one of every known infected by the disease is a health worker. A group of health professionals and concerned citizens urged the government to do away with lockdowns and resort to a medication that the WHO has recently ordered to stop. And the IATF formally orders the closure of all cemeteries and memorial parks in the country during the week leading to All Souls Day. We begin tonight with the European Union looking to cut the Philippines export tariff perks in light of alleged human rights abuses. Malacanang, unshaken by this threat, says, go right ahead. Maricel Halili tells us more.
Malacanang is challenging the European Parliament to go ahead and push through with its threat to revoke the country's tariff exemption on export products. European legislators adopted a resolution on Thursday calling to sanction Philippines over the alleged deterioration of human rights situation within its bounds. The European Parliament called to revoke the country's exports tariff incentives under the Generalized Scheme of Preferences Plus or GSP Plus. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said if the EU wants to put more burden to Filipinos in this time of COVID-19 crisis, then they should go ahead.
Gawin nilang gusto nilang gawin. Sa mga panahon nito, if they want to implement it, go ahead. They will be the biggest contributor to the violation of right to life of the Filipinos.
Roque noted that the country's economy has already reached rock bottom when the government imposed enhanced community quarantine, resulting in the closure of businesses and loss of jobs.
At the time of pandemic, they're threatening us. Sos Mariosep, what else do we lose?
Roque added that reports on supposed human rights abuse in the country is a classic case of misinformation. In his press briefing earlier, Roque said it is unfortunate that the government's enemies such as CPP-NPA is able to influence European countries. Roque also encouraged European lawmakers to attend the Interparliamentary Union Forum to discuss the reality of the human rights situation in the Philippines. Former police chief and now Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa said he welcomes foreign investigations on the matter since the government has nothing to hide. De la Rosa headed the controversial Oplan Tokhang back when he was still in uniform.
Wala tayong tinatago. They can come anytime kung gusto nila.
A Human Rights Watch official meanwhile dared the government to submit to international probe if it indeed has nothing to hide.
I think the UN, and again, I will not speak for them, relies on a multitude of sources that they independently verify. You'd have to speak to them about that. But I think we've seen time and time again that the truth has come out that way. But if the government is not comfortable with any or some of those sources, well, then open up. If you have nothing to hide, stand by our policies, open up, let the UN in, let other investigators in, and then we can see those facts speak for themselves.
External trade between the Philippines and the European Union bloc reached $1 billion in July this year. However, China, US, and Japan are still among Philippines' top trading partners, with combined total trade value reaching close to $6 billion in July. For News 5, Maricel Halili, we are One News.
A day after the Transportation Department reverted physical distancing guidelines back to a minimum of 1 meter, some drivers are still confused by government safety protocols. Greg Gregorio with the story.
The PNP Highway Patrol Group has started using meter stick to ensure that commuters are following the 1 meter physical distancing in public transportation.
Minabuti namin na magdala kami ng panukat para siguradong hindi magkamali yung ating mga HPG personnel na umaakit ng mga bus, pumapasok ng mga jeepneys upang siguraduhin ng guidelines ng IATF ay naipapatupad.
PNP HPG personnel used its meter stick during the random inspection of some public utility buses plying Commonwealth Avenue this morning.
Distance ng mga pasero ito. Ito yung 1 metro. No? So dapat sinusunod natin ito. So titingnan natin. Kasi sa tingin ko yung nasa likod na yun, wala 1 metro pakita na.
The Transportation Department implemented their 0.75 meter physical distancing measure public transportation on Monday. But after receiving backlash from the public and some government officials, the agency reverted the measure back to 1 meter. Authorities caught some buses that are implementing physical distancing measure but fall short, particularly those having passengers seated just 1 seat apart on a 3-column seat. Fortunately for the drivers, they were just given warnings instead of violation tickets.
Kasi sunod na lang, sir, hindi ko na mauulit. Ngayon alam ko na.
Pagbalik na lang po namin, 1:1 na lang po yung magiging sakay po namin.
However, some drivers were confused and said the DOT are allowed 1 seat apart distancing for buses with 3-column seat. But the authorities insisted that they are just simply following the latest guideline on physical distancing.
So far, ang latest guidelines, talagang 1 metro ang distansya ng mga pasahero. Kaya kami ay nagpapatupad lamang ng mga kautusan.
The LTFRB said they will issue a revised guidelines on limited capacity for public utility vehicles in relation to the strict observance of minimum 1 meter physical distancing. For News 5, Greg Gregorio, we are One News.
The IATF has ordered a week-long closure of cemeteries nationwide during Undas season. Presidential spokesman Harry Roque says cemeteries around the country will be closed starting October 29 to November 4 to avoid the spread of COVID-19, as Filipinos usually crowd cemeteries to visit the graves of their loved ones. People may still visit their loved ones before and after the closure week, but only at 30% capacity of cemeteries, and while observing health protocols such as wearing of face masks and face shields and observing physical distancing. Officials from the National Task Force Against COVID-19 made rounds of Baguio City ahead of the reopening of the country's summer capital to tourists next week. Starting September 22, Baguio City will be accepting tourists, but only from the Ilocos region for now. According to Baguio City Mayor Benjamin Magalong, walk-in tourists will not be allowed as every visitor is required to register on their website. The local government will then assess and approve the tourist forms. Tourists will have a designated tour guide, as do-it-yourself or DIY tours are not allowed. For now, the Baguio City government will allow 50 tourists a day.
Later on ho, saka ho natin bubuksan pag nakita na ho natin na confident na tayo sa pag-manage ng ating mga turista. We're still, we're still trying to learn. Bago to sa atin. We've never experienced this before. So mabuti na rin na unti-unti lang, umpisan lang muna natin sa manageable level.
Health officials found themselves being grilled at the lower house yet again after their proposed spending plan for next year showed what they said was lack of priority for the COVID-19 response. Ria Fernandez with the details.
A minority lawmaker quizzed the health department over its seeming lack of priority to the COVID-19 response in its proposed budget. In today's budget hearing, Deputy Minority Leader and Bayan Muna Representative Carlo Zarate zeroed in on the department's positioning of 10 billion pesos to address the pandemic under unprogrammed funds.
As I understand it, Madam Chair, pag nasa unprogrammed appropriation yan, ibig sabihin, wala pang pera yan, no? It can only be released subject to certain conditions like may excess collections, there is a loan or whatever, no?
Health Undersecretary for Policy and System Development Mario Villaverde clarified that the amount referred to was for 2020, which was already funded through foreign assistance. But the DBM only approved half of it to be allocated for the same purpose for next year.
Foreign assisted project amounting to 5.2 billion. Yan po ay for next year. Lahat po yan ay para sa COVID response natin, which will include both MOOE and some capital investment to improve our laboratory and testing capacities, to upgrade and to expand our isolation and quarantine facilities, and then to procure personal protective equipment and mga testing kits.
The reduced budget disturbed Zarate even more.
What kind of priority is that if our number one problem is COVID-19? At gusto kong ibalik, may 19 billion nasa isang task force lang. They can dispense 200 million per barangay. Kung may menu sila doon, patubig, palibing, kung ano-ano pa. But here, our problem sa COVID-19, you're only allocating 5.2 billion. So how is that for a priority, Madam Chair?
Despite this, Villaverde said they have separate funding for other interventions such as the procurement of anti-COVID vaccines. However, he admitted that the 2.5 billion peso appropriation for this is still insufficient to cover President Duterte's order to immunize 20 million Filipinos. With this, they are appealing to Congress for an augmentation of at least 10.4 billion pesos. But for Zarate, the DOH must first look at its huge allocation to Corrupt-Reed and PhilHealth, which comprises over 30% or 71 billion pesos of its whole spending plan. During the hearing, it was also revealed that some government hospitals serving as COVID referral centers suffered budget cuts. Among these are the Lung Center of the Philippines and the Philippine Children's Medical Center.
Tingin ko po dito ang assumption ng DBM. I am just speculating, Madam Chair, na baka naman kasi yung PhilHealth reimbursement sa mga ospital na ito, ayan naman po ang pinakamalaking gastos ng PhilHealth, reimbursement po sa lahat ng mga ospital, kasama po ang mga specialty medical centers, kasama po ang mga national government DOH retained hospitals and LGU hospitals, and also the private sector hospitals. At meron po silang nakukuha din from the medical assistance to the indigent program.
Nevertheless, DOH underscored its ongoing efforts to further bring down COVID cases in the country. For one, the World Health Organization Solidarity Trials for vaccines is slated to begin in the country by end of October. The agency is also elated with the emergence of more options for COVID screening, such as the antigen test, which has yet to undergo further studies. For News 5, Ria Fernandez, We Are One News.
Despite early notice, some Maynilad customers were unable to prepare for the ongoing water service interruptions due to maintenance work at Liputatan Water Treatment Plant in Muntinlupa. Around 249,000 households are affected by 14 to 24-hour service interruptions that started last night in Las Piñas, Parañaque, Muntinlupa, Cavite, and Pasay. Since last week, Maynilad had been announcing the schedule of water service interruptions as part of preparations to ensure water supply during the northeast monsoon or median season. But some affected customers were not able to prepare, forcing them to rely on around 40 mobile water tankers for their supply. These tankers were strictly guarded by Maynilad personnel to ensure health protocols were observed. Maynilad assures its customers that it will not extend the ongoing water interruption in these areas and that it will end tomorrow as scheduled. The Philippine Ports Authority has started testing automated ticketing machines in select ports in the country. This is to ensure contactless transactions among sea travel passengers and reduce possible transmission of COVID-19. The ports of Batangas and Calapan in Mindoro were the first to receive the electronic ticketing machines due to heavy passenger volume, which can reach up to 600,000 during the peak season. The ports agency is also planning to release a contact tracing mobile app which can notify passengers if they had been exposed to a COVID-19 positive person during their trip. The agency plans to officially launch the automated ticketing system and the contact tracing app next year. More stories when we return after a short break. Please stay with us. Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampa. You're still watching The Big Story. President Rodrigo Duterte has formally extended the state of calamity due to the COVID-19 pandemic until September 2021. Despite this and the still rising number of COVID-19 cases, a group of more than 5,000 doctors and citizens, including a former health secretary, is urging government to lift all quarantine restrictions and shift to their proposed alternative solution. Jenny Dongan explains.
We appeal to the President to lift all lockdowns, to allow our people to begin to rebuild their lives.
This is the plea of former Health Secretary Dr. Jaime Galvestan and over 5,000 members of the concerned doctors and citizens to the government to counter the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic in the country. In their campaign called Flatten the Fear, CDCPH said it's about time for the government to shift to an alternative solution. Dr. Homer Lim said the quarantine restrictions are no longer effective.
Hindi natin nakikita kasi how many people are actually dying of hunger. How many people are dying because hindi sila makakain, hindi sila makabili ng gamot kasi wala na silang pera, wala na sila source of income. So we have to find other solutions.
The group is also advocating for an early prevention approach or prophylaxis. Dr. Joel Lopez said the government should now focus its effort in early treatment and quarantine only those high-risk individuals, not the healthy ones.
Yeah, prophylaxis basically is for prevention, para wag silang magkasakit, para wag silang magka-infection. And basically, the key here is to strengthen the immune system. Because pag malakas yung immune system, hindi dadapuan ng anumang sakit.
Lopez suggests the use of hydroxychloroquine as prophylaxis to prevent COVID-19 infection. It is a medication used to prevent and treat malaria, lupus, and arthritis. However, the World Health Organization previously ordered to stop using HCQ against COVID-19. But still, the group insisted that it is affordable and safe if given correct dosages upon doctor's advice.
Basically, we recommend HCQ for those who are high risk of getting sick. So, but that decision still has to remain between the doctor and the patient. Yeah, so that's why we don't want it to be available over the counter. Kasi madami siyang, there could be possible side effects if it's not taken correctly. So the proper dosage and timing are really important.
The group also recommends daily dosage of vitamin C and D to boost one's immune system.
Eat well, sleep right. Pero aside from that, aside from eat well, sleep right, dagdag natin vitamins. Ang pinaka-importante mga vitamins dyan, vitamin C. So lahat ng mga gulay at prutas na mataas sa vitamin C, i-take natin. And then vitamin D. Marami ng studies showing that just taking vitamin C and vitamin D will help not only prevent infection, it will also prevent you from developing yung mga severe forms of COVID.
The CDCPH expressed interest in coordinating with the IATF to discuss the recommendations. The Health Department has yet to comment on the group's proposed measures. Meanwhile, President Rodrigo Duterte has extended the state of calamity until September 12, 2021 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This means that local government units can still access to their emergency funds until next year. For News 5, Jenny Dongon, We Are One News.
PhilHealth says millions of Filipinos stand to suffer if Congress decides to abolish the state insurer. This comes after the Palace and Senate President Tito Soto confirmed that President Duterte is looking into the possibility of abolishing PhilHealth. That is, he says, if its newly appointed chief, Dante Giran, fails to rid the agency of corruption. In today's Laging Handa briefing, PhilHealth spokesperson Ray Balena said that although they respect the president's view on the matter, abolishing PhilHealth will be a huge loss to the nation.
Respeto po natin ang views, no, ang pananaw po ng ating Pangulo patungkol sa bagay na yan. Pero syempre po, kung mawawala po ang PhilHealth, napakalaki po na magiging epekto nito sa ating bayan. Napakagandang programa po ng National Health Insurance Program at taon-taon po, marami po, milyon-milyong mga Pilipino ang natutulungan po nito. Kaya napakalaking kawalan po kung mawawala po ang PhilHealth.
Meanwhile, a House lawmaker is questioning the 2021 PhilHealth allocation pegged at 71 billion pesos, around 30% of the DOH spending plan. Bayan Muna Representative Carlos Zarate points out that some public hospitals that serve as COVID-19 referral centers have seen cuts in their budgets, yet a big percentage is allocated for the corruption-ridden state insurer. But Health Secretary Francisco Duque defended PhilHealth. He says these hospitals receive benefit claims from the state insurer. PhilHealth also assured its members that it has enough funding to last the current year. COVID-19 infections worldwide have reached the 30 million mark as daily cases show no signs of letting up. The latest tally is now more than 5 times the number of severe influenza illnesses recorded annually. That's according to data from the WHO. Some good news, more than 20 million have recovered from the virus, leaving global active cases at 8 million. That is nearly half of which come from the United States. The WHO also noted that roughly 1 in 7 COVID-19 cases are among health workers. And in some countries, that rises to 1 in 3. With this, the WHO is calling on governments to ensure enough safeguards for medical workers who are heavily exposed to the virus.
Globally, around 14% of COVID-19 cases reported to WHO are among health workers. And in some countries, it's as much as 35%. Every day, health workers are exposed to stress, burnout, stigma, discrimination, and even violence.
The WHO is also urging world leaders to leave politics out of COVID-19 responses. The WHO Emergencies Program Director Mike Ryan says it's important for top officials to issue clear and direct guidelines to their constituents. U.S. President Donald Trump has since said that a COVID-19 vaccine will be available within a month's time. The White House denies putting pressure on vaccine manufacturers to deliver ahead of the November elections in the United States, in which Trump is running for a second term.
There's a process of transferring knowledge to people. It's not just shouting at them. It's communicating with them. It's engaging them. It's understanding the confusions. It's understanding their concerns. It's understanding their apprehension and not laughing at it and not turning that into some kind of political football.
COVID-19 testing chief Vince Dizon is confident that the PBA's efforts to revive sports in the country amid the pandemic. According to Dizon, the PBA bubble currently being set up by the league is a symbol of the country's progress to transition to the new normal. Yesterday, the PBA discussed the preparations for the PBA bubble, which will take place in Clark, Pampanga. As the PCDA executive, Dizon thanked the PBA for choosing Clark as the location, and he reminded that strict health protocols must be implemented should the IATF approve the plans. The league is looking to restart its season beginning October 9. And here are the other big stories today. The Justice Department denies allegations that it red-tagged progressive political parties and human rights groups in an official report. In today's House hearing on the DOJ budget, Bayan Muna Representative Carlos Zarate questioned the agency's hand in the government's human rights situational report last May that said party list groups like Bayan Muna, Gabriela, and ACT Teachers were created by the CPP, NPA, and NDF, which the report branded as terrorists. Zarate defended his and the other groups mentioned. He says they are legally registered parties. Justice Secretary Minardo Guevara distanced the agency from the report and assured Zarate they are not implementing a red tagging policy. The Supreme Court upheld an earlier ruling dismissing the petition to compel the release of President Rodrigo Duterte's medical records. In a resolution made public today, the High Court denied lawyer Dino De Leon's motion for reconsideration and deemed it decision final after the petitioner failed to present in any substantial argument for a case for mandamus. In a 13-2 vote last May, the Supreme Court dismissed the petition to require Duterte to disclose his health status due to lack of merit. In April, De Leon had alleged that the president is looking unwell during his early public appearances on the government's COVID-19 response. Some groups have threatened to file a petition for writ of kalikasan against the DNR's dumping of dolomite sand along Manila Bay. A writ of kalikasan is a legal remedy that protects citizens' constitutional rights to a healthy environment. In a virtual press conference, InfraWatch Philippines argued that the project lacks any environmental compliance certificate, which is needed in tourist places like the Manila Bay. The group also noted the health risks and environmental impact of dumping dolomite on the shores of Manila Bay. But the Environment Department says the group's argument on the ECC bears no merit because the project is a rehabilitation and not a reclamation, which is why it has a certificate of non-coverage. Still, the DNR challenged the group to proceed with the petition.
That's what we're waiting for para once and for all malaman din ng taong bayan kung ano yung mga pinagsasabi nilang kasinungalingan And this is the only way na lumabas yung totoo na they are just trying to discredit the government. Huwag kong masyadong matalino. In the first place, ang sinasabi po natin dyan, yung lugar na yan ay may buhangin. Inayos natin yung buhangin, pinaganda natin, hindi po yan gawa-gawa lang namin. Ngayon pong maganda na siya, gusto nilang kontrahin. Bakit po nung basura yan, hindi nila dinamanda?
Some of you may have discovered some hidden talent while on quarantine. Well, level it up. Some folks took the time to polish their unique skills to grab themselves a Guinness World Record title. Frank Hakem from Hampshire, United Kingdom, now holds the record as the world's shortest bus driver, standing 4 feet and 5 inches tall. Hakem said he needs no special modifications in driving his bus. He simply adjusts the seat and the steering wheel and off he goes. Canadian-born Gary Dushel, who's now residing in the U.S., meanwhile, is the record holder for the longest chain made of gum wrapper. Dushel says he started building his masterpiece in 1965 when he was just in high school. The gum wrapper chain is now 32,000 meters long. And from one collector to another, American Paul Scardino holds the world's largest collection of Funko Pop figurines, 5,306 in total. India's Zorawar Singh, on the other hand, broke his own record for most skips on a roller skate, reaching 147 skips. He says he trains 6 days a week for 4 hours a day to achieve the feat, and he's not stopping there. He says he plans to break more records, hopefully no longer in the middle of a pandemic. And that wraps up today's big story. Catch us again on Monday, 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250. Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. I'm Robbie Alampay. We are One News. Good evening.